I remember clearly the moment my dad dropped that line. We were at my niece's graduation party. The whole family was scattered around the backyard among picnic tables, colorful balloons, and those inevitable plastic chairs that squeeze your thighs. The vibe was all hype, glasses raised, toasts to her extraordinary feat, a full ride to Stanford. My dad, Gerald, was rocking his usual khaki shorts and veteran's cap. Lifting his glass, he bragged about how far the Callan name had come, like we were talking about an ancient dynasty, not a middle-class clan from Pennsylvania that overdoes the potato salad on Sundays. I walked over with a plate in hand, handing out smiles. That's my part, the one who agrees with everything, the black sheep who dodges fights. Elias, my son, stood next to me, quiet, trying to disappear inside his hoodie. While everyone celebrated my niece's win, one thought wouldn't quit. Elias is just as brilliant as she is, maybe more. He got into 3 great colleges while working a shift and sharing my mom's chemo care with me. No private tutors, no SAT prep, just grit and whatever help I could give. It was on a regular Sunday, the kind where talk gets buried under clinking silverware. I leaned over and, almost like it was nothing, asked, "Dad, is Elias getting a share of the college fund too?" Gerald didn't look up. He just shrugged and muttered, "Why waste it on him? He comes from a broken family." The word broken bounced around inside me. It wasn't the worst thing I'd heard, and Elias had been left out before. But the way my dad said it, as if it were fact, cracked something I'd kept whole since I was 17. I stayed silent, smiling like always, while everything boiled inside. What nobody knew, not my dad, not even me until then, was that Elias had spent months sketching a speech. He would be the class speaker senior year. He wrote at night in secret in a notebook stashed under his bed. Graduation day came, and he stepped on stage with the gown brushing his knees and the mic shaking in his fingers. I felt something big coming, but underestimated it. When he opened his speech, the crowd went silent. When he hit the peak, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. "Some say kids who grow up in rubble don't make it to college," he said, scanning the bleachers. "But rubble turns into a bridge when you learn how to stack it." His last words hit like a hammer. I turned to my dad. Gerald Callan, the man who thought helping Elias was a waste, was frozen. For the first time, his eyes had nowhere to run. I dragged the Callan name through the mud the day I signed those divorce papers. When Aaliyah stood during that ceremony, it wasn't to clap, it was pure shock. But before you hear what she said, you need to understand the ground this story was planted in. Being a Callan means obeying unwritten rules. Love has fine print, traditions beat facts, and praise only comes when you fit the mold. I'm Naomi, single mom, librarian, my dad's ongoing letdown. And this is how my quiet, underestimated son did what no one saw coming. What he said on that stage rattled every brick in those picture-perfect walls. Let's go back to the real start. Not the graduation party, not the day Elias spread his acceptance letters across the table. Let's rewind 17 years to a cramped hospital room. With one hand, I held the newborn. With the other, I signed the divorce. He showed up at the worst possible time. My marriage had crumbled in silence. Ryan, my ex-husband, cheated on me while I was still counting kicks. He moved out 2 months before the birth, and ever since, barely does more than text, "Happy birthday." The news swept through the family like a cold wind. My mom cried harder over the marriage ending than when she buried her own sister. My siblings, Catherine and Joel, went months without speaking to me. My dad, Gerald, summed it up in a line that still echoes, "Well, you made your bed." Maybe. But I made another one. For Elias. I wanted it warm, safe, wrapped in bedtime stories. From the first look, that boy became my north. He grew up among relatives' whispers and eyes measuring the flaw on my ring finger. Even so, he built a silence packed with ideas. He watched more than he talked, and people mistook calm for weak. I knew they were wrong, but even I didn't guess how big the voice he was saving up really was. Graduation day rolled around. Packed auditorium, cameras ready for canned speeches about bright futures. When they called Elias Callan, he walked up slow. The light in his eyes wasn't nerves, it was purpose. Aaliyah, a classmate, stood, not to cheer, but in shock. That's when my son grabbed the mic. I used to say we didn't have much, but we had everything. We had each other. I worked as a librarian, short paycheck, long shelves, comfy silence. Every day after school, Elias parked himself in the kids section and devoured books. By 8, he was reading YA novels. By 10, he wrote stories that made me cry. Not for the raw talent, huge, but for the tenderness of a kid who feels the whole world and almost never speaks it. In our family, though, feeling wasn't enough. At Sunday lunches, the cousins took the adult table, laughing loud. Elias, 14 and full-grown height, got nudged to the kids' corner. At Christmas, they tore open video games and gift cards. He got socks. One year, they even forgot to stitch his name on the stocking. He didn't complain. He just folded his napkin 3 times before the first bite and jotted in a notebook what he didn't dare say. Every one of his gestures made me want to stand up and yell, "Don't you see?" I figured silence would speak for itself. It didn't. The only one who saw Elias whole was my mom, Doreen. She called him my little professor, sat and listened to every ending, even when chemo left her drained. The second he walked in, her face lit up. In my mom's last winter, she squeezed my hand and said, "He's you before the world told you to shrink." That night, I realized the real gift I could give my son wasn't in boxes or a seat at the table, but in space, so he'd never have to fold himself to fit anywhere. When she passed, Elias was 15. That day, he looked stone still. The tears only came later, in a poem I found tucked inside her Bible. The title, "The Last Woman Who Saw Me." That's when my heart broke. After that, it was just us, moving through a family that treated us like extras while starring in their own show. Even so, Elias never lost his cool. He studied, helped at home, wrote at night. Senior year, he handled every college app solo. The replies hit fast, accepted everywhere. So when my dad said at the Sunday cookout, "Why invest in him?" I just smiled. It wasn't surrender, it was a warning. They never realized who Elias was about to become. Some moments brand your soul for good. My dad's line did that, carved itself into skin and memory. "He comes from a broken home," he'd said as casually as a weather report. I looked at Elias, fork hanging over a paper plate, ribs cooling, no tears. He dropped his eyes and chewed slow. I wanted to grab my dad's glass and dump it on his lap. I wanted to shout that he knew nothing about my boy, but I stayed seated. In this family, raising your voice just hands ammo to those who want you quiet. And in that silence, I made my promise. They won't forget Elias's name, because the next act of our story is already rolling, and when the final scene hits, no one in the audience will be able to ignore who he is. I found Elias typing in his room. I asked how he was. "Fine." Seconds later, he looked up. "Do you think it's true?" The question cut right through me. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. "No, son. What's broken is how they see the world, not you." He nodded, but I saw the doubt hiding behind his eyes. That just became another silent note in the notebook of things he never says out loud. The next morning, Elias changed. He started studying like crazy. Every scholarship, every contest, every extra job, everything was as essential as air. I was afraid he was running from something, not toward something. One day I came home early. I heard muffled crying behind the bathroom door, short, stifled sobs. I didn't knock. I sat on the floor, my hand on the cold wood, and thought about all the times he'd felt alone because I was afraid to rock the boat. Months later, I noticed another shift. Elias had gone back to writing, this time for himself. He stayed after class with the English teacher who told me, "He's not just hardworking, he's necessary. His words carry weight." One night at dinner, he set down his fork. Guess what? I was chosen class speaker. My utensil slipped, not from surprise, but from the size of that moment, a mic, a stage, the audience that had once belittled him. "And the speech?" I asked. Elias broke into a slow smile, full of something new, and said, "I'm going to show them what it means to see someone whole, not broken." Right then, I understood. He was finally running toward his own echo, and anyone in the audience would have to listen. Elias no longer just wanted the scholarship. He'd figured out that what he really wanted was to be heard, truly heard, in a room that had ignored him for 17 years. When graduation was only days away, I waited for someone in the family to break the silence. A congrats, an emoji, any gesture, nothing. Catherine showed off her daughter's dress. Joel bragged about his new grill. Nobody even mentioned Elias, but he'd stopped looking for approval. He spent hours over a notebook, crossing out lines, murmuring parts he thought were secret. Every word felt like a spark ready to flame up. I didn't read the speech, but I could see the weight he carried. It wouldn't be a courtesy. It would be lightning. The house felt like air before a storm. Elias moved calmly, but it wasn't peace. It was focus. Something pulsed just under the surface, waiting to break through. When he took the stage, the words would hit like thunder, and this time, the whole room would hear. I asked how the speech was going. He gave that half smile he uses when hiding the truth without lying. "It's coming," he said. "I just want it to have weight." That word kept hammering at me. Weight. He wasn't trying to fill a slot in the program or pad his resume. He wanted to talk to all of us. He wanted, finally, to be seen. The night before graduation, I found him on the porch, notebook open on his lap, eyes fixed on the sky. He looked smaller, almost the boy who once asked if trees feel pain. I sat beside him. "You don't have to hold all this alone." He didn't take his eyes off the stars. "If I don't speak now, when will I?" I nodded. No more advice to give, only space for him to stay true to himself. Silence filled the night, thick but comfortable. Days earlier, I'd sent the family every detail: time, place, parking. No reply, not even a "we'll try." I expected it, but the emptiness still hurt. To them, it'd be just another Thursday. To him, it was the moment to stop being invisible. That morning, the house held its breath. Elias came out in cap and gown, suit sharp, posture of someone who knows where he's headed. I lifted my phone. He kept a serious face. "Ready?" I asked. "I've been ready a long time," he said, straightening his tie. The school auditorium overflowed. Programs flapped like fans. Teachers beamed. I led Elias backstage, then found my seat. Before I sat, I froze. Gerald in his veteran's cap, Catherine arms crossed, Joel buried in his phone. The family that never showed at rehearsals now sat in the third row as if they'd always been there. I said nothing. I went back, squeezed Elias's hand. "Whatever you say up there, I'm already proud of you." He nodded, eyes steady, not a trace of doubt. The ceremony began. Honor students, awards, applause. Then the principal called the name I was waiting for. Elias, valedictorian, full ride, accepted to Northwestern. Behind me, whispers. Who would have thought? Elias walked on stage. Instead of the speech the school had approved, he carried his diary. He opened it, drew a deep breath, and started the usual thanks to teachers, classmates, staff. Then he paused, and the whole auditorium seemed to freeze. "There are people here who never expected to see me on this stage," he said, scanning the crowd. "Folks who thought coming from a broken home made me an unfinished project. I learned you don't need a perfect family to build a solid future." Dead silence. Every word found its mark. When he closed the diary, the ovation was instant, not just for the achievement, but for turning wounds into fuel. And there, in the applause, I finally breathed again. Quiet settled as Elias opened the diary and looked up. No paper trembled, it was his life laid bare. "Some kids are born surrounded by applause, others have to fight for every clap," he said, staring at those who tried to erase him. "That doesn't make us smaller. It makes us stronger." I looked for my dad. Arms crossed, lips tight. That hard stare I've known forever. Feel every word, I thought. Elias wasn't done yet. I realized then this wasn't revenge or simple defiance, it was settling accounts. The room slowed, like everyone inhaled together. Elias went on, "They told my mom I wouldn't measure up, that she failed by raising me alone. But she didn't fail. She fought. She taught me to stand when no one clapped, to work in the shadows, to trust myself when the people who should have backed me doubted." The audience, teachers, parents, classmates, leaned in. Throats tightened, eyes shone. Still, my family didn't move. Gerald, stone still. Catherine shot him a look. Joel kept staring at his phone. Elias shut the diary calmly, like closing a chapter. The snap echoed louder than any applause. Then, for anyone still doubting, he finished, "I don't need you to like me. I just need you to listen, because today the voice you ignored is too loud to silence." The first clap came from the back, and one by one, everyone stood, except my father. But it didn't matter. The debt was paid. Gerald slumped like he was pretending not to care. On stage, Elias stood tall, calm, hands empty, nothing left to prove, only something urgent to say. He breathed. "I spent years confusing silence with peace," he began, voice steady. "I thought if I kept my head down and worked hard enough, I might stop feeling like a guest in my own family. But one day I understood, nobody invites you to take up space. You claim that space, you build it, you make it yours." The room held its breath. Parents nodded, kids whispered, teachers discreetly wiped their eyes. Elias closed the diary gently, raised his face, and locked onto one spot. Gerald. "I grew up in what they call a broken home," he said. "But broken homes don't produce broken people. They make fighters, listeners, leaders. They make kids who stand here and force even the quietest to listen." The impact hit like thunder. For a second, nobody moved. Then the wave. Applause that wasn't polite but real recognition of something bigger than a grad speech. People on their feet, eyes wet, hearts racing. And then Gerald stood up. Slowly, like someone still figuring out the next move. For a second, a flicker crossed his face. Shock, realization, maybe shame, still far from pride. That would come later. The story didn't end there. It was only starting to be written in front of everyone. Maybe one day pride would come back, but in that moment, Elias had already won. We left the ceremony and walked to the car. I thought I'd see him bursting with excitement, but he moved in silence like the sea lying still after a storm. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded. "I didn't do this to hurt him." "I know. You did it to heal yourself." He gave a small smile. I thought about the crowd. Someone out there might have needed to hear those words as much as we did. That's just who Elias is. No anger, no bitterness, only courage. Hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Gerald. He surprised me. I stared at the screen. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd said months before. And it didn't matter. Elias had said everything that needed saying, and the world heard him. You'd think that after watching your own son get on stage and speak the truth in front of people who pretended he didn't exist, everything would change overnight. It didn't. On the surface, nothing moved. Gerald didn't call, didn't show up after the ceremony, didn't hug Elias, and in that silence we realized real change doesn't start with the other person. It starts with the one brave enough to speak. I spent 3 decades waiting for my dad to say 2 little sentences, "I'm proud of you," or "I was wrong." It never happened. Yesterday afternoon, he broke the silence another way. He sent a short text, 3 raw words, no period. For Gerald Kalin, that was already a crack in the concrete. I didn't answer. This story was never about him. Later, Elias and I sat on the living room floor, Chinese takeout boxes open, while his speech played on loop in a stranger's stories. The caption read, "Best graduation speech I've ever heard. This kid is going places." The views shot up every minute. "That's your legacy now," I murmured. Elias shrugged. "It was just a speech." "No," I corrected. "It was a statement." He stayed quiet, eyes on the glowing screen. I didn't do it for him, or for them, he finally said. I did it for us. For the version of me that thought he had to shrink to fit into this family. Right then I got it. I'd spent my life trying to keep Elias from feeling small. In the end, he showed me how to be whole. I spent years silently begging for a simple sign of approval. I measured every step so I wouldn't upset my dad, wouldn't stain the last name, wouldn't make Elias's life any heavier. I believed that if I shrank enough, a space would open for us. But Elias never wanted a seat at that table. He chose to build his own. In the weeks after graduation, he changed. A steady calm showed up, like someone who's walked through a gale and come back stronger. He packed for college with excitement, not fear. He closed the door to his childhood room like finishing a well-written chapter, not losing a refuge. He wasn't running from the family's indifference. He was moving toward the life he'd built, choice by choice. And me? I finally stopped waiting. I don't send photos nobody asked for. I don't hope Gerald will acknowledge me as his daughter. I don't waste words explaining Elias's talent to people who prefer the shadow of their own pride. I don't need them to see him. The world already does. Have you ever lived a moment so simple yet so powerful that everything around you went silent? Mine came a few months after Elias started college. He called from his dorm, voice shaking with excitement. "Mom, guess what? I won the Freshman Writing Award." I smiled before I even answered, because deep down I already knew. "Of course you did. What was the piece about?" He paused a second, then blurted out, "It was about growing up with a mom who made me believe I was enough before anyone else could say otherwise." Right there, among apples and jars of peanut butter at the store, I cried. Because that's the real ending to this story. No revenge, no validation, no medals. It's love, a quiet, stubborn love that refuses to let go even when everything screams to give up. A love that raises a boy who becomes a man knowing deep down his own worth, so solid that even the hardest rejection can't knock him down. A love that may not fill a college fund, but never runs out of faith. If anyone's ever tried to make you feel small because of your family, your scars, or your past, remember this. Broken homes don't make broken people. They make fighters. They make writers. They make sons like Elias and moms like me. If this story hit something in you, if it reminded you of your own journey or someone you love, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell your story in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. Every voice matters. When we share our truth, we don't just heal ourselves, we help others realize they're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, honest, subscribe and join the community. Here, we don't talk about broken people. We talk about turning points. Thanks for staying till the end. It was good having you here.